Thank you very much, Wolf Lisa, for your input. I sort of left me now a little bit puzzled. So you say in a way that it is absolutely necessary to stick to the gallery model, because without this gallery model, and I'm thinking now about our young students here, there won't be a way to enter the art market. Did I understand this correctly?
Well, as an artist, if you look at it, if you want to show your work, which possibilities do you have? In Germany, there are a lot of Kunstvereine, which are a kind of non-profit associations in many cities which show work. That is one possibility. That is not in every other country. Other institutions normally are already looking, pre-select artists who have been shown before. There are not many institutions which totally take new artists and present them to the public. So it's an important part to go through this step, and normally galleries even show new artists for several years, which means 2 or 3 shows before they really reach some kind of established position. So of course that is extremely necessary, but as I try to, maybe I pointed out the critical aspects too much, but I'm still doing it, and it's a lot of fun on the other side. But it is definitely has become more difficult for the middle range galleries, the so-called program galleries, and you have to be really inventive about it.
And maybe I have a question also that's related to what you said and what you said, Mrs. Toms, is to educate the public. So in a way, the galleries are also educational facilities, like universities, in a way to educate the public to pay attention to what they believe is important to keep or enter the art market.
Yes, I think so. I mean,
I take this. At the end, what we need is to have a platform. So I think, in my opinion, art does not work without interaction. So if you don't have a visitor, it's not art, yeah, first. And so if it is a museum or a gallery or an art fair, we all build up platforms. That is the most important thing. And I would not agree with the aspect you said that it's enough to have a good website and you don't need galleries anymore. If you look at Raphael Rosendahl, for example, he's doing so many websites, and he has visitors more than 40 million a year, and he still loves galleries, and he's working with galleries, and it's important for him to have galleries, and galleries can dream about to have 40 million visitors per year on the web pages. It's really a big fight. So to educate and to have platforms, that is the most important thing, I would say, yes.
Well, about what is educating the public, I would agree, but I think that public institutions, museums, and exhibitions done in public institutions are the ones that have to teach the audience, that have to create this awareness. I think that galleries already do a lot of work, and that maybe it's a bit asking too much to also ask them to be this kind of, so providing all this information to the public. I know they did, but I think they also have the work to just to present, and all that you said about going to art fairs and so, I think it's already a lot of work. So I think it's something that has to be more distributed, you know, and that, yeah, and I think, well, but anyway, it's a good thing if they do, because it also lowers down a bit this kind of perception that many people have, that they feel intimidated with the gallery. I think that is also a starting point. Many people have many prejudices towards the gallery and towards the art market, that galleries are evil, that they just want to sell, etc., etc. Of course they want to sell, but this is part of a whole ecosystem. And maybe one of the first things is to find a way that people are not intimidated and see a bit this part of the gallery.
Yeah, I think what you mentioned is this kind of gatekeeper attitude of galleries. Maybe we could talk about this also. And I feel it also that sometimes we're discussing with the students that there is a fear that a gallery is a kind of gatekeeper that only lets sort of certain artists in and not others. Maybe I think that would be also quite interesting to discuss of how to enter actually a gallery. I think that's something that's very interesting to artists. And I think, Paul, you did a really very nice survey in your PhD where you actually, maybe you could talk about this too. You interviewed, I don't know how many hundreds of artists and asked them how they want to enter the art market. Maybe you could share this with us. This was really, really telling, I find.
Yeah, I have to remember it was a survey that I sent over to around 800 artists that I found online and searching in databases, in festivals, and those with gallery representations that they didn't have. There were around 500 or so that actually answered the survey, and I asked them a set of questions about their expectations. And I was on one side, I was quite impressed to see that there was a certain percentage who had no interest in the art market. They had no interest in making artworks that would be preserved. They saw everything as a research and as something that is just ephemeral. That was one thing. And most of them, what I saw, to speak very general, was a quite naive idea about the art market. They didn't know how to enter the market or how to deal with it, how to play the rules of the market. So that was a bit in general what I found there, you know. But right now I have to remember all the data that I had there. But basically, there was this kind of lack of connection between artists who have been working with new media and that were maybe very used to the festival scene and to an environment more related to artist research, and had less knowledge about how the art market works. So that was maybe a lack that I found.
Very vividly that one of your questions was what would be the highlight of your artistic career, and I think almost 80%, or if I remember it correctly, would say an exhibition at the Venice Biennale, and that was the same for the media artists, which I found really interesting.
Yes, of course. That was a question that was a bit difficult for them also, but yeah, most of them saw. In terms of how they could get recognition, most of them were thinking, of course, about having a show at MoMA or having a show at the Venice Biennale, and less about having a show in a very good gallery. So I think that was the main way they saw their artwork being recognized. And there was also quite a lot of them who were interested in having being in symposia or having a book written about their work, etc. So also all these types of recognition more related to the academy.
How to get in the gallery. The secret.
I'm sure many of the students are interested.
Well, there are some aspects which you can identify, even so there are, of course, a lot of luck or anything, how you would call it. I mean, I mentioned that when galleries starting, when they're starting new, that is a good chance to get into a gallery, of course, because the stable is not that fixed. The program might be not that well defined. There are exceptions on that. If someone comes from a really experienced background, sometimes galleries get started by ex-assistants, which is actually a good career, who have already worked in the art field for 10, 15 or even longer years, then start their own gallery. Of course, they have specific ideas who they want to take on, and very often already know the artists they want to represent. But when you have a young gallery starting off a gallery and is just developing and forming it, very often there's a chance to get involved if you make a connection or you feel you feel well in that context. Generally, what I always tell people, if they really want to approach galleries, really carefully look at the program of the gallery you want to approach. Would it make any sense to being represented there in this context? Does this gallery have a chance to promote and support your work from what the gallery is already doing. I mean, just extreme examples. People are writing me about photography or paintings. I mean, of course, that is not possible at all. So you take your time to really observe the program and maybe go to the gallery several times for the openings or exhibitions to really understand the concept of the gallery. It's not easy, yeah? But if you feel that it's really could make sense for that gallery, and then I have to admit, at the beginning, in the first years, I took on artists who I just liked. I loved the work. I didn't care if it's possible to sell or not. Meanwhile, I look as well on the stage this artist is. It has to be somehow comparable. So taking on a new artist, totally fresh from the university, and building up the career of such an artist takes a lot of investment. And I would only do that when I'm really excited about what the person is doing, and I would feel that from that public, which are the customers and the collectors I have, this would be an interesting addition. This would bring new aspects, something which I don't represent yet, but on the other hand, it is somehow not so far away from what I'm already doing.
Questions? So if there are any, please raise your hand. Hands? No? It's, yeah? Kevin?
Testing. Hello. You spoke about interaction, of course, with the art. You spoke about an emotional response that you had as a young man. And I'm wondering, as a gallerist, if you feel you've been able to deliver that type of emotional component to others, to your visitors. You've had. As a gallerist, oh, I'm sorry, Julia. You had an emotional response as a young man to the gallery, and I think that that's a very powerful thing that museums and galleries still must and do present to people. And I'm wondering, as a gallerist, in your experience, have you been able to deliver that to your visitors?
Of course, that is very important. I mean, when someone enters my gallery, I talk to the people, always. I'm not the kind of person who sits there behind a desk and writing like that and hoping it goes away. That has a lot to do with my, if you so call it, mission, like starting a very difficult field in a very early time. So I had a lot of things to explain all the time. And I don't mind that at all. And I really appreciate if people, of course, start understanding and really, you see their eyes lighten up and they understand. Of course, that is very important, what you have to do.
And I'm wondering, different types of media have different emotional capacities, perhaps, would you say?
No. I think I'm convinced that individuals have their own kind of art they resonate to. Could you say that, resonate to? Or which resonates with them, yeah? So it doesn't really matter what kind of art you sell or what kind of art you represent, as long as it is good for what it is, which means that is a different story. We could go into that longer, but somehow the presentation and the aesthetic object and everything has to be really on a higher level. But that it resonates with you depends on your personality. This is always so funny. I mean, I sell software art a lot, which means it's moving on the screen. And at the same time, I sell early plotter drawings, which are or early works which look like a very conservative drawing on a piece of paper. If you don't know the concept behind it, you would say, well, you made some lines, okay, I mean, I can do it myself. So people who understand the whole background of it, there are still people who say, I love these plotter drawings, but the software from the same artist, they can't relate to. It really depends.
first of all, congratulations for the presentations. They are very enlightening and very interesting. I have a question regarding these platforms for online sales of art. When you have all this plethora of platforms, do you think because the fact that they are online, they get onto the stage and compete to other goods that are also sold online, like clothes, movies, streaming services, because more often than not, they are pretty much the same platform like you show with Amazon. What is your opinion about that? And if there is this relationship with these other goods that are sold there, how does that affect the actual artworks? Because as you showed, some of them have this viewing option of how it would look in an actual space. So then the criteria for buying it would be maybe, does it go well with my furniture or not? That might happen in the actual real conventional model of the gallery, but since here the computer screen is the same platform that you would use for buying shoes and all that, does that make any effect on the art? What is your take on that?
I think there are several questions there. On one, if I understood well, on the one side you were asking about platform streaming content like Netflix and Spotify music.
Yeah. Because now we are consuming all these goods online.
Yeah, in fact, many of these companies have presented themselves as the Spotify for art, or the Netflix for art, or imagine a Spotify and Apple TV got together for art, something like that. So they kind of use this relation, also to be identified in this way, to kind of explain in a simple way what they are doing. So what I find interesting here is that these platforms lead us to think what is our conception of how art should be experienced and where it goes and about the context that we create for art. We are used to seeing art in a frame, in the context of a gallery or a museum, or in some way that it's been pointed out as art. Now, if you compare seeing art on a streaming service to watching Netflix or listening to Spotify, now the problem is that you don't consume movies and music the same way you consume art, or at least that's how we have imagined it until now. That is what is being put into question right now. Because if we think about an artwork that is something that I buy and I put on my wall and it's living with me forever, it stays there and it's just one artwork, then the question is, if I put it in this frame and I can change it every week, or I can change it every time I feel, or I can put on the same screen a photograph of my holidays, then what happens with this art? It becomes a content. And then the question is, does it lose its value, its aesthetic value, or its conceptual value, or what do I make of it? I think that's questions that are unresolved. I think that it's interesting that this is happening, and this becomes a different way of experiencing art. And then, as I said with this quote by Benjamin, the image can take new functions. So this could be good or bad, but I think it all depends on how we use it. The problem is that if we compare with the music or books or film, etc., those are media that were made to be reproduced. We have understood them socially. We understand it that, they are made to be made as many copies as possible. So an artist that has sold many records is considered a good artist. A movie that sells a lot of tickets is considered like a good movie, or it's very popular. But in the art world, we are in the opposite situation, that the art market sets that there can be just a few copies sold. So the whole thing is quite debatable right now. What we're going to do when we are changing the context of how we are experiencing art.
Yes, I do have a question concerning the clients. How could I imagine, are the old clients as private collectors or museums who had a long history, for example, with you, staying with the galleries, and the new ones who are coming up are more researching and getting in contact via the platforms, or how could I imagine? Could you maybe say some words about the clients?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, but are those long-term clients
You mean
who
specifically-
stay with you, or do the long-term clients stay with the galleries and the new ones are surfing through the
Especially in the
platforms, or how did it develop, or yeah?
Especially in the field of digital art.
Exactly.
It has changed. In the first maybe 10, maybe 15 years, until about 5 or 6 years ago, most of the collectors which I have were collectors which I made collectors, which means I got them excited about the field and they more or less started to collect. So they were totally new and developed into that. This has very much changed now. Now, mainstream collectors, well, it's maybe a wrong word, collectors from other fields of art are now opening up, becoming interested because they see there's something interesting going on, and I have a few who have started to buy now digital work as well, beside other work they have. Further, there is now finally, which we waited for a long time, this younger generation which has grown up with the internet more or less, which are in their 30s, middle 30s and 30s, who have started to make some more money now. So meaning young collectors, they have begin to enter this field as well. And they have, of course, a totally different relationship to digital media than their generation before. But before that, the collectors were really all above 50.